All right, all right, all right. So we are now live and very much in charge on the internet. Um, Welcome everybody to another episode. This is actually episode number 13 of the full set. I am here with my esteemed colleague. I feel very important every single time I say that. With my esteemed colleague, Dr. Moya Bailey. Moya, welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me, DiDi. And also thank you for your contribution to the book.
Yes, we had to get our lives together, first of all. I remember the very first time that I ever heard misogynoir, I was like, I have to find out who said this, right? Like, wow, right? And we'll get into that. But when I met you, you were just a really wholesome person, which is, everyone's going to hate me that I'm saying this. It's really hard to find in academia. You were like, gee, like long lost siblings, that's really the impression that you gave me. And you were very welcoming into your space. And so I knew you had written the book, and we'll get into that later too. I knew you were writing the book, but I wasn't sure what it was going to look like or anything like that. And I had to buy 100 copies because we had to support Black femmes. So,
yes.
So we're giving them away to other Black femmes for free. I also want to know if it's misogynoir, that everyone's excited to get Damon Young's book, and like the margin is like a little bit lower for your book. I mean, I have all these questions. Anyways, how are you?
I'm doing well. I mean, as well as can be expected in these COVID-19 times.
We're in the Rona.
We're
in the midst of the Rona.
We are in the surge.
What's going on for you? Like, are you in Boston right now?
I am in Boston. My mentee.
Y'all got signs.
Yes. My mentee is a graduate student at MIT who is sheltering in place with me. So the two of us have just been making it work. So that's what I've been up to.
Okay. This is my okay face. Shelter in place. So I feel like there's a conversation being had right now on Facebook, but it's an undercurrent of a conversation. Everyone's like, stay home, do you, be safe, right? What about the Black women and non-men who cannot like stay home? Like what, I mean, not saying that you the doctor for that, but like what kind of like support can we give those, because we're the first to lash out. We're the first we're mad at each other because, Surgeon General's out here telling us it's your fault that you got the diabetes. And if you get the Rona, you're going to die. I mean, he's just so much, right? Van Jones too. So what does it look like to support one another during this time?
That's such a great question. I think for people who have the ability to stay home, I think it's our job to advocate for people who can't. So that means making sure that you are involved in the mutual aid in your community, that you're making sure that people have the PPE, that you're supporting Instacart strikes, that you're doing the things that keep mostly Black and brown folks out of harm's way and making sure they have the things that they need. Which means not crossing that picket line, which means not using Instacart right now if you can absolutely possibly avoid it. Because
I got a delivery on Tuesday.
Tuesday is just making it. They're going on strike.
I was like, is it popping up yet? And it did.
They're going on strike May 1st.
Okay,
so
all right.
I think so.
Come on, Mayday. Somebody had to do
exactly,
it. Somebody had to do it. Okay.
Exactly, because it's mostly when you think about who's doing that work,
right?
It's Black and brown folks. So, and the things they're asking for are just so simple. Like, can we get, hazard pay? Can we get some gloves and some protection?
Like, I just need to protect myself when I'm handing the groceries over.
I'm just saying. So these are little things that definitely for those of us who are in a position to stay home, we can do that work for our folk.
Should everyone go on strike?
Yeah, so.
Okay, I just wanted to see if you wanted to topple everything just like I do. Okay.
Yes, rent strike, We're organizing a rent strike in my building. So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see how it works. But
I wanted to slide in there that I think that rent strikes in buildings are actually so important. Someone explained it to me because I was like, no, my landlord, he's not into that. This motherfucker literally came over to my house to mow the lawn in the midst of Corona because he wanted to make sure we were going to pay the rent. He was like, see me, I'm still doing my job, you do yours. Right? Like, and so what does it look like when your landlords are also people of color, right? And so
that's a very different, exactly. That's a very different thing than when you're living in a building that is managed by a multi-million dollar, exactly, a multi-million dollar company that has multiple properties in the Boston area and beyond. So they can handle people not paying rent.
Organizing it, like y'all are organizing it. Because I don't want to assign it to you because I don't want it to ever come back to you.
Oh, yeah. No, it's actually one of my neighbors who's taken the lead, and we actually met through a Rent Strike Boston on Facebook.
Okay.
And so there are wonderful little pamphlets that we slid under doors so that people can know about what's going on, and then trying to make sure that people know that different neighbors know about it.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was just going to be me because I was like, well, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to go to work. I really don't like, why are we doing this? This is the perfect time to pivot, like, you know? Exactly. And I'm not sure if we've got it all together, especially when people out here voting blue no matter what. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow. So
yes. Oh gosh. It's a sad state of affairs.
Why are we even like this? So anyways, why did you decide to go into the field that you were in?
So it's kind of a funny story.
I love funny stories. Please tell me all about it.
Okay, so I thought I was going to go to medical school, and I was pre-med all through undergrad, and I even took the MCAT, visited a med school, and then I met medical students, and I was like, oh no.
You were like, they hate it here.
They hate it here, and they seem very sad. I had never met graduate students before, so I wasn't really understanding that it was actually quite similar. But I fell in love with women's studies while at Spelman. And
Spelman?
Yeah.
I know. I was just acting so
So a friend of mine actually was like, just take the GRE. You studied for the MCAT, just take it. And I was like, okay, fine. And yeah, I was like, oh, I want to do this. I want to pursue this more. And that's how it started. That's how I went to grad school.
At least, no, not going to say that. I'm working on being less problematic at all times. So there's that. So I want to move forward and ask I want to say this very succinctly because I have it written down, but I'm looking at you face to face and I'm like, let's be legitimate about this. What is it about? There is also a divide between Black academics and Black non-academics, right? And like, especially when we're talking about the same topics. I think about a lot of Black people in academia who are being subjected to white supremacy in all forms, who are being laden with debt through like student loans and all the things. And there's still a very real conversation about like obviously you and I are connected, but that may not be the case with every ratchet Black girl. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and so what does that look like? And why do you think that there's such a divide and that most people, when brought to their attention, especially during this time of harm reduction, when brought to their attention, they're not sure how to address it?
Well, I think it's hard for any of us who have experienced not having privilege to accept the places where we do. So, I mean, actually, this is one of the places where I feel like a little bit of compassion for white people, like in the sense that, like, it's hard sometimes when you are both marginalized as a Black person, but then also experience class privilege as a result of being in the academy. And so there's a desire to be like, no, we're the same, you know, like we have this culture.
Still at the cookout.
You know what I mean? Like we have these cultural things that we share, but the way, I mean, just even in what we're talking about now, the privilege to be able to stay at home, to still be able to collect a paycheck versus, you know, my folks who also live in this building, who are essential workers and have to go out. And, you know, that's a very different reality. And I don't think we do a good job in the Black community talking about class. I mean, one, this country doesn't do a good job, but I think it's particularly hard for Black people because we come, like even our class ascension is only like a generation or two. So people really have a hard time and want to claim, you know, that authenticity that I don't think
You're melting my heart. I feel like I'm a pat of vegan butter. Like, like, this is so refreshing because I feel like I've had these conversations on my page and like have tried to mitigate both sides. Because as someone who's like 19 credits away from my degree, I'm like, okay. And like, I also know that once I reach this point, that I will also be considered outside the loop, right? Because people already assume that about me. I'm like, no, just have a high school diploma at this point. That's it, right? And so I'm glad that you were able to uplift that it's more so of like not understanding what the privilege is, because we assume that privilege means money. Everybody assumes that privilege means money. And so I really appreciate you like answering the question that way. I just want someone to be on my side. That's really what I wanted. Thank you so much. I wanted to talk to you about the book. Mm-hmm. Now, I want you to dish with me, like give it to me straight up. What part did you write?
So this is
two other white women on top of this book cover with you. I just want to know, where do I focus?
Two black women. Sarah J. Jackson. Sarah J. Jackson is a Black woman.
Okay. I'll allow it.
So I would say that we wrote this book together, but we have different fields that we draw on for the analysis. So Brooke, the white woman, Brooke is very much a data quant kind of person. So it was really her network science analysis that allowed us to get access to the tweets. And then Sarah and I did a lot of the analysis of the tweets that were there.
Are you saying that Brooke, the white woman, is the reason why you were able to catalog such rich experiences and history in this book? There are so many examples of hashtags that I forgot some of them and the corresponding stories of why they even came to be.
Oh, I mean, Brooke was the one who like was able to synthesize what the hashtags that bubbled up were. Right, so in terms of analyzing and talking about the hashtags, that's the work that Sarah and I did, kind of contextualizing where this comes from.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. I was like, I just want to go to the part where Moya wrote. Thank you. So my entire team was like, damn, you're really going to promote this book? I was like, of course. It says Moya Bailey on the cover. Sorry, Sarah. Love you now. So I wanted to touch upon a point in the book. In the chapter, hold on, because I got a napkin, because that's what kind of bookmark I'm working with.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. In the chapter Women Tweet on Violence, there's I was about to say there's a scripture. There's a passage here that says that the networks that form around women employing hashtags to talk about gendered violence on Twitter, like the ones we examined in this chapter, become spaces where a growing number of people connected by their use of hashtags and the shared trauma that inspired their deployment can amplify the same kind of feminist critiques that have often had limited or elite reach. What the hell does that mean?
It means that in the context of people creating networks of conversation around these Twitter hashtags, people can have conversations that otherwise wouldn't have made it to mainstream media. Okay. So in the way that Solidarity is for White Women gets deployed. There are conversations that white women in mainstream media weren't paying attention to, but through that hashtag, it gets amplified and there's a whole group of people and you can't ignore it. So these were conversations we've been having in our communities for a long time, but hashtag solidarity is for white women makes it visible to a larger group of people.
Okay, thank you for that. So what a lot of people don't know is because I was just waiting for y'all to promote the book. And then I was like, I'm tired. 2 years to write this shit. I'm tired. Is that you all solicited sounds amazing actually now that I've said it out loud. You all sought out the input of people who actually worked with hashtags. So you connected with Feminista Jones and she's in the book and like, you know, and also you reached out to me and you were like, listen, can you write an intro, an extro, an outro? I don't know, like, what do you want to do? And I was like, me? Like, you know, and I had to make the connection between the Black Lives Matter hashtag and what it meant to me and like what I felt when I first came across it. So first, I want to say thank you because
but thank you. I mean, well, can I also say, DiDi, it was also because of your work that we, you know, sought you out. It wasn't just like, who should we talk to? It's like the work that you had been doing in Cambridge really brought us. Yeah, that's how we came to you.
So can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
You don't have to give specifics because it's been so long. Cambridge was so 2016, right? But when you stumbled across me or you, Sarah or Brooke, right? What, like, you were like, this DiDi Delgado person is doing what? Like, because there's a conversation, which we'll get into, but the word promulgated, there's a conversation that happens often in spaces. I remember when you all first released the book and you were promoting it and you were like, digital activist of the week. And people are being funny and we're saying, what's a digital activist? And I'm like, for me, my digital activism is how, much like a hashtag, I amplify the work that I actually do on ground, locally, nationally, or internationally.
Absolutely.
You saying I came across your work in Cambridge, I remember I wasn't famous in Cambridge. I mean, just only inside of Cambridge. I wasn't.
Okay, so you don't remember this, but the first time we met was at Brandeis. And you were speaking on a panel at Brandeis. This was a Black Lives Matter event. And you had to run and catch
everybody on that panel now that you remind me. Okay, go ahead.
And you had to run and catch a train at the end. And I was just like, hi, DiDi. You were like, I gotta go. And I was like, but it's nice to meet you. But at the event, you were talking about what it had been like to organize in Cambridge and kind of the tensions between Cambridge Black Lives Matter and Boston Black Lives Matter. Mm-hmm. And so I was just like really impressed by, you know, how you were navigating that challenge. You know, these cities are literally across a bridge from each other. And there was still like this idea, and that Cambridge Black Lives Matter had more kind of political power, if I can say that.
I don't know what to say.
Than what was happening in Boston.
I'm really humble though. Like,
No. But I'm saying that I think what was happening in Cambridge at the time, and from what I remember, was that Cambridge was able to mobilize in ways that Boston wasn't. So that was pretty salient to us.
Thank you. I think for the most part, when we talk about activism, right? So there's often, even now, like I won't go into it because obviously I don't speak on things I'm no longer a part of, but my work with Black Lives Matter helped shape me as I learned how to organize. And I think about all the trainings I wanted to go to and nobody wanted me there because I'm loud and boisterous. I think about like, you know, how I searched so much outside of myself, often for guidance, right? Mm-hmm. And everything, you know, I've heard so many of my mentors say, you have everything inside of you already. Like, you know what I'm saying? We have everything inside of us that we already need. And so my organizing, the more people like you and others came up to me and was like, we see your work in Cambridge. We saw that the housing went from 11% allocation to 20. And I'm like, it wasn't me. It was just, you know, I was just pushing the babies to do that. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, how can I support you? Let me get you money. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was pregnant during the majority of that. And so it's just really affirming
Oh, I'm glad.
I appreciate it, because I thought that most of it was changes in leadership. I came over and took over Black Lives Matter Cambridge because of certain leadership structures that weren't working for the people who were actually the most marginalized. And I was like, we're gonna have to shift some things here. You may not know me, and I am from Boston. Oh well, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and so I really appreciate you saying that. And the reason why I asked is because I took notes, and there is a chapter. My favorite chapters in books always end with conclusion, unless it's sci-fi. Because I just can't even believe sometimes that I've gotten through a sci-fi book in the first place. So when you use the word promulgated, I just get really excited. And if you could just say it the rest of the show, that would really make me happy. There's a quote, and it says, I feel like this was all you, first of all. We push back against the notion promulgated by some that the real work of change only happens offline. Networks and narratives matter, and both are built digitally and corporately, and every media technologies have been sent. Let me read it from the book, because I feel like my voice to text played me. Push back against the notion promulgated by some that the real work of change only happens offline. Networks and narratives matter, and both are built digitally and corporately. I can actually hear you saying this. In every era, media technologies have been central to the maintenance of counterpublics and the safe development of counterpublic identity and politics. For the networks we study, Twitter represents a very real opportunity to work towards change by reintroducing and reframing issues for the public that have been either misrepresented or ignored in the mainstream public sphere.
Yes.
Thank you for saying it, because literally people, I mean, I know it's not just me. There are so many people who utilize social media to amplify their messaging. I wish that Martin Luther King Jr. or whoever, like, I think of a long list of Black feminists who came before us. I really wish Ida B. Wells would have been like, and let me tell you what she retweeted about me. Like, you know what I'm saying? So look like? I mean, like, I feel like that's the absence of what we say. You know, I once participated in a panel here in upstate New York that was like beyond the hashtag, beyond internet organizing. And I was like on a panel with like some members from SNCC, right? And I was like, and like, because y'all weren't able to amplify your message, it's only just now because of social media that we're amplifying messages from H. Brown and, like, you know, Elaine Brown and everybody Brown. And so, like, we're able to amplify these messages, I feel. So what does it look like for you if people say this book, and the fact that, first of all, you and the word misogynoir, I stand. I could never explain before. And sometimes I feel like people still kind of bite back because people only want to understand misogyny because white women write about it, right? And so when you discuss the misogyny against Black women labeled as misogynoir, a term that you coined, you know, do you feel like people, even though you have like these doctorates behind you, that they still try to play with you?
So two things. One, to the first point, I definitely do wonder what would happen if, you know, people in the past had something like Twitter. And I think that, and I don't know who it was, so I am not doing very well on my site, Black Women, but you can look this up, that a Black woman professor did an experiment with some of her students, and they were making tweets as if they were these historical Black characters. And so they were tweeting about different historical events, which was really kind of cool, and giving them the voice and having them use kind of the language of now to talk about events that had happened in the past using Twitter. And I think that's such a wonderful experiment. And I think about the Red Record, which is something that Ida B. Wells was a part of, which was really documenting all of these instances of lynching that had happened. And part of that was, you know, doing something visual. So like putting out this red flag every time a Black person was lynched. Right. So there are visual ways and other types of media that were utilized, even that were social media before social media was online. Right. So I think and that's part of the impetus for the book as well, is to show that we are using this as a tool. It's just one of the tools that activists have in their toolkit for all of the organizing that they're doing. And again, as you said, it's an amplification of work people are doing on the ground. And
because I think, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was going to say, and for people who are disabled, you know, and for people who can't, you know, get out in the world the way others can, it can actually be a real mode of activism. So this idea that it's somehow lesser than because it's digital, or it's lesser than because it's on social media, that was part of the whole idea we were pushing back on with the book. And with misogynoir, I mean, people wouldn't know that word if it weren't for social media. You know, I wrote about it in my dissertation, which no one will read, which is fine, because that's, you know, that's the nature of this academic game. Please don't. But like, that is where I initially wrote the word. But when I wrote about it in an article on Crunk Feminist Collective, it was something that then could spread, something that Trudy got excited about, and Trudy started writing about it. And so it spread even more. So, I mean, I think that, again, what is important is how we are using this as a tool to spread ideas and to spread and make a conversation.
Thank you for that. I think about, you know, I think about all of us, right? When we talk about historical figures, right? And how one day we will be historical figures. And I think that it's important for us to continue the conversation that using hashtags and using social media in general, but hashtags as not quantifiers, but like as documentation markers, right? I feel like that is going to mean something later on down the line. I think about, we can discuss today who was doing the work and who wasn't, right? And who was just like a political figure and talking head, right? And then we know now, because we have the text and we're sharing them, who was actually on the ground, right? And who was doing both, like you just said. I didn't even realize that the Red Record was about, so to speak, like the way that you just connected it together and said that this was the social media of that time, would have never even put that together. I was just like, we all need to document movement history, right? You know, and so this is really good. And so I really appreciate the entire book. I'm actually only midway through it. I was like, they just sent it to us yesterday. Like, so I really just want to say thank you, because your time is extremely valuable. And I know that we didn't get a lot of time together, but I wanted to talk to you. Everyone's saying hi to you. I love this in the comments. What I want to talk to you about feminism for a second. This is my feminism phase. So do you remember when you said that there was a Black woman professor who was like, please go to these historical figures and tweet as if you were them? Came across a tweet the other day from clearly a Black woman who was just a regular degular schmegula, and she quoted Angela Davis as saying that basically Black men and white women are the same, that they're trying to compete for the status of. And so I think about it, you know, if you read Race, Class, and Struggle, right, there are concepts in the book that allude to such, right? And also there are many different texts when you talk about Audre Lorde. You talk about the absence. I think of even someone like Michelle Wallace, when you talk about either the absence of men or what the thing is that men are doing wrong, there is a clear distinction then that comes from feminist theory that jumps into misandry. Like, and what I'm trying to get across is, it's not a stretch. It's not a jump. You know, to be inherently feminist, I think, is to uplift the narratives of Black non-men, period, right? And so there is an exclusion there. And so misandry is it's not a far cry as some feminists who proclaim, I am a Black feminist and I have read these other Black feminists and I see nowhere that misandry is talked about. What say you?
And I love that you just drank from your cup after that. That's so great. One, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think that
I love being right. This is my favorite show. I love this show.
I don't think that they're far from each other. I do think that there is something about the way that Black women have always seen Black men's desire for power in relationship to how white patriarchy looks as something that's attractive, and also Black women's suspicion around white women and their attraction to white supremacy that has given men. Yes, that has given them a different perspective and has asked for us to overthrow everything. Like, we can't just assume the power that exists, get in the door to that power, because as Black women, we know there isn't a place for us there. We don't have the male privilege and we don't have the racial privilege. And so that gives us a different perspective of what needs to change in society. So for me, Black feminists have always been asking Black men to think about things a bit differently and to question patriarchy at the root. And there was a great comment, like a small comment during the Clark sisters documentary.
Yes, I just watched it.
Yeah, that someone mentioned on Twitter, and somebody was saying, like, you still have men leading your churches. When you see all of the work that Black women are doing in these spaces, and also their devotion and their deep religiosity, it really raises the question, why are men still in a position of power in these spaces when it's the Black women who are really doing the work and supporting the church? So I think Black women have historically questioned this place. And I think people's reluctance to question Black men and men in general is part of the way that patriarchy is able to reproduce itself. Mm-hmm. People really get scared about this idea that people are going to think, oh, you hate men, oh, you must not like them, etc. And I think that fear drives some women away from feminism, as we've seen.
I remember when I first came into feminism, no one knows this story, it's fine. I'll tell it anyways. Danielle LaGrosse-Georges was the Boston Poet Laureate for some time. She was the first Black woman, and yet also Haitian born, to be the Poet Laureate of Boston. There was a white man for several years, and then a white man before him, and so on and so on and so forth. And I remember she's like a professor at Lesley. And I remember, like, we were walking and talking, and, you know, who am I that I was like chilling with the Boston Poet Laureate just for a lunch date. And this is like before activism, this is poetry. And she was like, yeah, because Black feminist theory. And I was like, I'm not a feminist. This is 2014, DiDi. I'm not a feminist. And she was like, well, what do you mean? You're a woman. And I was like, I'm a humanist, right? I don't feel like there's a divide between, we're just like, I felt like a white woman. Now that I'm looking back on it, you're so divisive. Like, you know what I'm saying? And I wonder what it is, because this is something that's actually been sitting on my spirit. I want to talk about my spirit real quick, Moya.
Yes.
Thank you. Come on now. So something been sitting on my spirit that there's this, what is being assigned to certain misandrists is that it's our queer theory, and that thus straight Black women, or, you know, heterosexual Black women, cannot understand what it is, where it is we're coming from, because we're either not in relationships with men, or so it's not a one size fits all. And I really struggle with those conversations with people who date primarily men, because they look at me as like, oh, well, you date women, and so you have an outlet. Like, I don't even know what that means, but right, it's really hard to get into conversations, and that's why I actually stay away from them. I say what I say, you know, I get banned from Facebook because I say men are blank or whatever, right? And, you know, then it's always someone who's like, well, I could have told you we need to like uplift Black men, or it's not all Black men, or and I'm like, why do we even have space for this conversation actually right now? I'm not sure. And while I'm not trying to knock anyone's hustle, Moya, I do feel like, you know, they talk about COVID as a time for like looking inward. And I want us to really examine, like, why are we so afraid to let go of our uncles, you know, because that's a conversation too. Well, you know, I have 5 Black brothers, and also I think about their relationships with women, right? Mm-hmm. And I think about their relationships with their mother. I think about their relationships with me, right? Sure. And I'm just trying to figure out if healing needs to be done, obviously in this co-created community of Black folks, right? Can't we focus on ourselves without being seen as man haters? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think one thing that I got from Spelman was...
you better say that.
First, what I got from Spelman is a sense that feminism was always mine. So I never felt like feminism belonged to white women. So like even Black feminism as a term is something I adopted after leaving Spelman, because feminism unmodified was my feminism, because that's how I learned it. I learned it with Black women at the center. So it's a different way of relating to it. And so I understand how you come into something definitely shapes your experience of it. And so when I hear people saying things like, well, what about our uncles? What about our people? I mean, again, I think most or a lot of Black feminists have a politic that is not about disposing of people, but it isn't about, you know, just letting them go through their lives unchecked and unchallenged.
Are you okay, sis?
You know, like you have to ask questions. And I do think that there's a way that we haven't allowed men the space, and not us particularly, but as a society, we have not allowed men the space to like do that emotional work that they need to do.
I think of bell hugs when I think about emotional.
Yes.
And I encourage them.
Exactly. But that's
I
not
don't have the that's not my work.
That's not your work. And also, like, you can't do it for someone, you know, like people have to want to do it. And that raises another question, which is, and to go back to your conversation about Black academics, what are we willing to do with our places of privilege? And I think this is where we have to model what it looks like to challenge and deal with our privilege as marginalized people. So there's an organization called BEAM, you know, Black Emotional and Mental Health Collective, that is trying to do a lot of work with men around questions of emotional mental health and doing that work within the Black community. So I'm excited to see that being lifted up as something that people should be paying attention to. But again, that's led by a Black man, Yolo Keeley, who is like helping other Black men, leading them in doing that work.
No, I'm all for it. Speaking of Black men, what say you about Tyler Perry? And remember you and I had this conversation about it. Who is this person? I think their name is Sway or something like that. And they wear the bright blue. I sent you the link like a year ago when I did the Northeastern panel.
Oh, yes. And we were talking about...
It's Quay. I think that's what their name is.
Yes. Blame it on Quay.
Blame it on Quay.
That's exactly right.
The correlation.
You know, okay. Yes. No, go ahead.
Between Tyler Perry and Blame It on Quay is like, of course, there's like an age gap there, right? But it's actually, if I'm not mistaken, I feel like either I saw this or I woke up from a very incredibly bad dream in which Blame It on Quay appeared in the finale of a Tyler Perry.
No, that actually happened. No, you didn't make that up. That happened. Yeah.
And so, you know, I know that both of these individuals have a lot of followers, and I have gotten into, it felt physical, altercations with Black women about, well, this person is like uplifting us and telling our stories. And I was like, I want to know where the uplifting part comes in. I also want to know, like, I feel like a lot of it is a mockery of Black women and the pain that we experience. And not just Black women, like there's an erasure of any other gender that falls in between that, right? And so in the beginning, when God created Blame It on Quay, I felt like this kinship and like a haha and a tee-hee and a giggle. But then I just felt like I was the butt of the joke because I am the ghetto ratchet girl. And then there's more ghetto ratchet girls than me. Like, you know what I'm saying? And so like, how do we contend with the topic that, no, this is just comedy and you take everything too seriously?
DiDi.
Yes.
This conversation stayed with me. And so, yes. And so I talked to my cousin about it. My cousin follows a lot of those folks who do this. So not just Blame It on Quay, but there are others. There's somebody named Not Carlton Banks who does these church ones where he performs as a Black church woman. And for those, it doesn't hit me the same way as Blame It on Quay. It seems to be not a mockery, but in some ways loving. And so I'm like, what is the difference between this for me and somebody like Blame It on Quay? And how are people discerning that? And is that real, or is that just my perception? Because you're right, in so many of these examples, Black women end up being the butt of the joke. And it's all about how ratchet Black women are. And so I even went back to before Blame It on Quay, Lena Waithe, who...
I knew you was going to bring up this bullshit. You know, okay, all right. I'm sorry.
So Lena Waithe was the writer for Shit Black Girls Say.
Right.
Another one of these videos that has a Black male comedian dressed up as a Black woman, and in it really making fun of all of these things that are supposedly associated with Black women. And so it's like, you know, sometimes it be your own people. And so that's the other thing about misogynoir, is that it's not something
that Black folks exact misogynoir on other Black folks.
Absolutely. And Black women at that. So the fact that Lena Waithe was the writer for this little parody sketch was really disappointing. But again, it follows a history of using Black women to get ahead. So the same way that Tyler Perry used Medea, the same way that Blame It on Quay uses this character TT, all of these people have been able to garner success from playing this ratchet caricature of who Black women are.
And does that play into the politics of what social capital looks like for folks who are actually the marginalized folks?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
my heart burns.
You know, because it's not equivalent. So Blame It on Quay, performing this character TT, gets lots of accolades, etc.
Just in a video on the Don't Rush challenge.
Exactly.
Famous Black women. I was like, y'all couldn't think of nobody else. Y'all couldn't bring Lizzo on.
You know, this is what I'm saying. So actual Black women get lost in the story.
Right.
And then it's also like, I also worry about it because he has presented himself as cis het man. And so for me, it then raises questions about, one, how people see Black women in relationship to masculinity, but also what does that mean for trans sisters who get somehow incorporated into this, you know, faux drag performance that has nothing to do with them. You know what I mean?
We're not going to bring up Joanne the Scammer either, even though that's my favorite. I'm so problematic today. It's Monday.
And Joanne the Scammer, I mean, that's an interesting story.
Because
you know, the actual person
is queer. Right. This person is queer. And also this is who they are. Right. And also it parlays into sometimes, the ancestors done left a word on my shoulder. It parlays sometimes into the arena in which Black or white cis folks who have a queer identity, but they're still identifying as cis, really shit on Black women and non-men who appear this way, right? And so, you know, there's a conversation about, I one time got into an argument with someone who was from, well, technically I didn't get an argument with them. I got into an argument with their partner, and their partner was relaying to me that it was okay for them to say, woo, Chile, because like because I was like, that's not how you say it, number one. But it was because their partner is a Middle Eastern, darker man of descent. And they were like, well, you know, y'all have been using words that we use in ballroom and this, that, and the third. And I was like, it's not the same.
Exactly.
You know, like,
no, and I think that's something that's lost also in what people see, the connection between Black communities. So Black straight women connected to ballroom, Black straight women have been in ball culture, Black queer women have been in ball culture, obviously not at the center, but the idea that this language doesn't, you know, travel and translate, I think that's not accurate.
There was a question from T. Anansi Olajuwon, who is also on the show. They said, hey, doctor. He says, I wonder how cross-dressing drag as an art form fit into this conversation with regard to race and class for us, queer and otherwise. And so I would definitely suggest going back to the beginning. But for me, you know, like I can't speak on dressing in drag, obviously. But right, I feel like there's a very clear distinction from characterizing someone dressing in drag than to someone actually living that lifestyle. You know, I think about all my dear loved ones who do this and get harassed for it. I'm not saying that the character TT doesn't, but they're seriously profiting off of the pain and labor of not just Black women, but those individuals who also are, like you said, trans, or even if they're not trans, this is what they do. You know, it's a privilege that's sandwiched in between comedy. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, I need to write that down.
And that's something we have to think about too, is the context of where this is being performed and who is consuming it. Because when I think about drag culture, yeah. And where, I mean, I think of Medea and Blame It on Quay, TT. These are Black Christian conservative folks.
Well, you took it there, didn't you?
Who otherwise in other contexts might not support drag, queer people, etc. So I think it's important to note where this is being taken up and how it's being used, because by not identifying, not saying that, you know, the artist who does, or Blame It on Quay does not identify in any way, shape, or form as part of the LGBTQ plus community, I do think that it sets up an idea that this is somehow separate and different. And in some ways it is, but that difference, I think, protects him in his performance when it actually creates violence for other people.
Thank you for explaining, because we've been actually in and out. Sorry, my computer froze, but we've been in and out of this conversation for a little while now. You and I have been. So thank you for reconnecting with me on it, because I could never, for me, it was very difficult to explain why Tyler Perry was problematic, because a lot of people would be like, oh, but he owns his own shit. And why is it every time a Black man gets up here, y'all want to bring him down? I was like, nobody wants to bring him anywhere. That's neither here nor there.
Right. But I mean, that's the thing. If your ascension is on the bodies of Black women, and it is part of kind of shitting on Black women to get to where you're going, I think that's a real problem, you know. And now to turn around and have the studio that is supposedly going to have this LGBT youth center, all of these things that I think.
Do you believe it?
You know, I mean, it just seems so, I mean, I don't even know what the word for that is. Perverse, maybe. To like use this misogynoir to get to this place and then use that money in this way. I mean, I hope that it does what it needs to do for those people, but it's still disturbing how he got there.
When do you think that Black feminist theory will ever move outside of the margins, or does it need to stay there? Do you love me or do you love me? When I don't run on script, that's the best way I run on Duncan. You understand?
So I think I have two thoughts about this.
Okay.
One, I kind of feel like there are things that are ours that we should not be saying. So, like, I don't know if you saw there was a meme that was going around and it was just letters. And it was a Black woman talking about Georgia reopening. And so it's just these letters. And the letters spell out something that most Black people, when they read it, they knew exactly what it said, only by the letters of this thing. And so for me, it was kind of one of these inside community moments of like, this is something that we all share. And I don't know that it needs to be translated. I don't know that I want it to be translated. I think some things are for the communities that they're for.
Right.
And don't need to be consumed in other places. But I think that the theoretical underpinnings of Black feminism, when we look at Combahee River Collective statement, like if Black women were
I've been trying to get Barbara on this show. I'm like, you my neighbor. I live 6 minutes away from you, Barbs. It's okay. I'm over it.
But exactly. If Black women were free, it would necessitate the freedom of everybody else. And so like,
what is that whole follow Black women? So that's what I mean. Like if we're saying, yes, this is supposed to be a protected thing because it's all we have when we actually support one another. And then also folks do need to be following Black women and non-men. So what does that look like? Like what can we share and what do we keep for ourselves?
But right? I'm saying we share the theory, we share the principles, but like the cultural things, like the inside things, those are things that are gifts and are part of growing up in a community.
Thank you. I almost told this white woman who was struggling, I was like, did you like, and I was like, I was like, I'm not gonna, I was like, well, you know, you're in my thoughts and prayers. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because it's just not for them. Like, you know, and they colonize so much anyways, I would be hard pressed to share another tidbit and another morsel. So I just want to say thank you to, I can't wait to go through the comments. I want to say thank you to you. I didn't want to take up so much space because I know you was like 7 o'clock. And so there is that. No, there is that. No, there is that. I want to be respectful of people's times. I do know that I would love to have you on again at some point because this was just supposed to be quarantine talks, but then some random white person had it. It made me really sad. I don't like to do anything that white people do. I did my own thing. But I still feel like we've been doing this show every day. Like, I can't sleep because our stories and uplifting them are so important to me that regardless, I mean, thank God I like you, but regardless if I like the person or not, I'm very interested in having conversations. So that way Black community can see that like we're all in the circle together and like, how do we lift up the communities I'm in and I'm a part of? Like sometimes I get worried. I don't get worried. I worry about us existing in an echo chamber because I find myself being like, damn you white women. 2 white women are coming on the show tomorrow. They'll probably the only white women, but I'm just tired of like voting blue. The whole narrative I hear about it. I'm like, is that all y'all got? Y'all didn't think that doing that the first time around was gonna land you Donald Trump. And also I'm not even trying to talk about this person. So, the other thing I wanted to ask you is, in our community, what say you about the numerous, the big misinformation that happens around, you know, when we talked in the very beginning of this podcast, we were talking about what the Surgeon General was saying briefly and what Van Jones had been saying. Why is it Black men obscure women of color and Black women? So on the Van Jones special, there were 2 women. One was a Black doctor and the other one was, I think she was Puerto Rican. And they were discussing like what the narratives are. They were talking about systemic racism in the healthcare. They were talking like, and then here you have like our Surgeon General and Van Jones would be like, Black people, it would behoove you to stay home, right? And so what is it, do you think? I know that we have a general mistrust of medical professionals because of all the amazing experiments that they put on our ancestors, right? And also what they continue to do when it comes to Black maternal health rates and things of the such. How do we get to a point where we learn to trust each other around the information that we cycle? Because staying at home, if you can, is actually essential. And I'm bringing this up, I'll preempt it so that we can answer it. There is a video that, I don't know why I'm in these Black consciousness groups that have over 20,000 people. Sometimes I be forgetting I'm in them, like, because I feel like a lot of Black folks' entry into activism as Black feminists was the Hotep period.
Oh, totally.
Okay,
absolutely.
Nobody wants to admit that but me. So I'm glad you're on my side again. And so like, that's why I try to like not parlay with the Hoteps too much, because I was there and I understand that for some, they will never move past that point. But for many that I know, it was definitely an entryway. And so there was a video in the group, and it's a doctor, very clearly an affluent person, very learned, has his own private urgent care practice. So you already know PPOs is out the roof, right? And he was saying he has all the data. He has all the data as to why the state of California should reopen because they only have a 0.03 death rate. And I'm like, that's because it's shelter in place. And like I think because we don't trust our own bodies sometimes. We're like, that's the reason why the government has been trying to keep us down, So how do we mitigate both? We like, the harm is here, right? And then like, our freedom is here. We know we're at a very pivotal point. Whatever. How do we like walk the line to freedom?
Just a little thing you just want to throw out there at the end. How do we walk the line in freedom? Part of walking the line to freedom is having access to information. And so even as you're talking about your Hotep period, like I know so many of us who, like, part of it is getting access to more information and to more literature. And for me, that looks like reading different things, looking at podcasts, but also I have the time to do that. And also thinking about what Black spaces make available to us. So I'm thinking about Black radio. I'm thinking about even things like World Star, like what kind of information.
Like I'm triggered. I'm like, did you mention World Star? Okay.
I did. I'm thinking about these spaces because they meet Black people, some of us where we are, but they have such a tight, narrow narrative of who we are and what information we have access to.
It's very concerted, like.
Yes, totally. And
we fight and we make music videos on World Star.
And there's more to us than that. And I want these spaces, even, this Hotep 20,000 member Facebook thing that you're a part of, to have more.
Oh, you didn't have to say it like that I was a part of it. Wow, that escalated very quickly.
But for there to be other types of information in those spaces. So for those of us who are able to like tolerate it and like be there and be the voice, the dissenting voice, like somebody's gonna see whatever it is that you say and say, oh, that doesn't make sense.
Do you know what my bridge was from Hotepism to Black feminist theory?
What was it?
A woman, I don't know if you know her. Her name was Elaine Brown. And
yes. I do know Elaine.
She wrote a biography, an autobiography, and in the book, she was talking about how all of the Black women that were part of the Black Panthers, like, really felt silenced, and how, like, she felt like the more information she found out, it wasn't even through the Black Panthers, right? And so, like, I was like, well, what does this mean, right? And I was like, at first, like, 2015 to 2016, DiDi Delgado was like, Elaine Brown is my hero. And then she came out publicly in a tweet and was like, I don't even know what this Black Lives Matter business is. Like, they need to, and I was like, wow, shots fired. I'm canceling you. You know, like, and so like, what responsibility, this will be my last question. What responsibility do we have as people who have these platforms and have the information to widen, right, other people's analysis? What responsibility do we have to not, I don't want to say to not be in conflict, but to like not really make conflict our main narrative? I think about someone, like if I could not talk about Black women, just talk about Ta-Nehisi Coates and Cornel West. Like why was it necessary? Was it useful?
Right.
I don't know. I feel like I'm in a harm reduction class right now. Like, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, again, this is about what people are willing to do and where your comfort zone is. And not even just your comfort zone, but like, what are you best suited to do? And also, what kind of responsibilities do you have to other people who are part of your community? I definitely think that there's something about folks who are in positions where they have more information to try and share it. But I wouldn't assume, there's no reason to try and share that information to, you know, the white supremacist who Zoom bombed, you know, your conversation. Like that's not useful for you. That's just
Let me do this labor real quick.
you know, and something that one of my professor said when I was in college was that, you know, you don't need a lot of people. You really just need the people who are committed, and like you all will attract more. Like your energy, you doing your work brings more people to it. And I've always been sort of really moved by that and trying to think about, where are my skills, where are my people, and how am I utilizing that to the best of my ability? And so, you know, I can write, and
you can write.
So I'm writing books, and so
we have literally 27 more copies left of. These are my bookmarks. Don't be mad because I'm ghetto, okay? It's Bounty, the quicker picker upper. So we have literally 27 more copies of this. If you are a Black femme or non-man who wants a copy of this book for free, please, please, please comment, and I will make sure you get the link. I'll slide into your DMs and make sure you get this link. And white folks, y'all need to come off these coins because these books cost a lot of money. MIT Press, Lord, be offense, okay? So I'm going to conclude this by asking you, one, was there anything that you were surprised I did not ask you about? And two, who would you like to see on the show?
Well, you already said it. I'd love to see Barbara on here. Yes. That makes a lot of sense. Neighbor, that makes a lot of sense.
Like, come on, AOL, still email holding person.
I'm surprised. No, I'm not surprised by anything. Yeah.
I'm very proud of you. I just want to say thank you again for trusting me and for being like, I don't know what this DiDi has up their sleeve, but you came and I appreciate it, as I have appreciated all my other guests, but I appreciate you more because, like I said, when I first met you, I thought I was in the presence of an amazing person, and you were like, and I know you too. I mean, and that just made me feel like, wow, like I feel like we both had such humble beginnings. Do you still live in Roxbury?
I do.
I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. So I just want to say thank you for joining us on this episode of The Full Set. I hope that you stay sucker-free and COVID-free for the rest
of the thank you. Back at you. Back at you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I hope you have a good night, Moya.
I hope you do too. Thanks.
All right. Peace.
Bye.